Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into one of the most shocking and heartbreaking twists in Little People Big World history. Matt Roloff recently transferred half of Roloff Farm to his fiancée Caryn Chandler, but unexpectedly Caryn sold her share to an Australian businessman for $2 million. After the sale, she permanently left Matt Roloff and married her secret boyfriend. Caryn Chandler's betrayal deeply broke Matt Roloff's heart. Matt Roloff later filed a lawsuit against Caryn Chandler in court. According to the court's verdict, Caryn Chandler was sentenced to 8 months in prison. After this incident, Matt Roloff's ex-wife Amy Roloff and her husband Chris Murick claimed that they too deserve a share of the farm's ownership. Their argument was that the farm had been part of the family's legacy for many years, and therefore they too could rightfully claim ownership of the property. As a result, new disputes and tensions erupted within the Roloff family over the ownership of the farm. As the conflict reached its peak, Amy and Chris took Matt to court. After weeks of heated battles, the verdict came down. Matt Roloff was ordered to apologize publicly to Amy and Chris. He also had to transfer a portion of Roloff Farm to them. The once united Roloff legacy had now been divided forever. Stay tuned because this story has everything: love, betrayal, money, and the fight for family legacy. It started quietly like most tragedies do. Matt Roloff had always been a man of vision. He wasn't content with what already existed. He wanted to build, expand, and dream beyond limits. Caryn Chandler admired that about him. She had seen him struggle through surgeries, family disputes, and TV fame, and she admired his resilience, or so he believed. In late spring, under the soft Oregon breeze, Matt called his lawyer and made the decision he would officially transfer 50% ownership of Roloff Farms to Caryn Chandler. To him, it was love made legal, a declaration that she wasn't just his partner but his future. "Caryn's been my rock," he told a local reporter. "She deserves to be part of this legacy." The paperwork was done in a quiet office in downtown Portland. Caryn smiled as she signed, her hands steady, her voice calm. To anyone watching, it looked like a fairy tale moment, the next chapter of a beautiful love story. But what no one saw was the flicker in her eyes when she glanced at the final page, the clause that gave her full rights to sell her share at any time. Matt didn't question it. He trusted her completely. For weeks, everything seemed normal. They filmed together for TLC, hosted fans at the Pumpkin Festival, and laughed over dinner like any couple in love. But something inside Caryn had shifted. She had been receiving calls late at night, hushed conversations, whispered laughter, numbers saved under fake names. One afternoon, while Matt was inspecting a new barn design, Caryn met a man named Ethan Mororo, a Canadian investor from Vancouver. He was charming, calculated, and persuasive. Over coffee, he told her he'd been following the show for years, that he admired her strength and independence. Slowly, their meetings turned into dates and those dates into secrets. Within 3 months, Caryn had made her decision. On a quiet Friday morning, she met with Ethan's legal team in Portland. They offered her $2.5 million for her share of Roloff Farms. Caryn didn't hesitate. She signed the contract, shook hands, and smiled. That same evening, Matt came home early from filming and found her suitcase by the door. She didn't cry. She didn't explain. She just said softly, "I'm sorry, Matt, but I can't do this anymore." By Monday, she was gone. Matt stood alone in the living room, surrounded by silence. The woman he trusted most had taken half his world and sold it to a stranger. But the worst was yet to come. Because Magulaf wasn't just a man who built farms. He was a man who fought for what was his. And this time he wasn't backing down. The morning after Caryn left, the farmhouse felt like a ghost house. Matt Roloff wandered through the kitchen, her mug by the sink, her perfume still lingering in the air. Silence filled the place that once overflowed with laughter. Days passed without a word. Matt shut off his phone, canceled filming, and roamed the empty fields. Every barn, every corner whispered the same word: betrayal. When he finally turned his phone back on, headlines screamed the truth. Greater than Caryn Chandler sells half of Roloff Farms for $2.5 million. Canadian investor buys into the Roloff legacy. Then came the letter, official, cold, and stamped with Morrow Holdings Incorporated. Ethan Morrow was now co-owner of Roloff Farms, planning to redevelop it into commercial property. The letter from Morrow Holdings was not a request. It was a declaration of war. It lay on Matt Roloff's kitchen table. The crisp corporate logo a stark contrast to the warm rustic wood. The words commercial redevelopment swam before his eyes. They wanted to turn his legacy, the fields where his children had taken their first steps, the pumpkin patch that had witnessed a million smiles, into a strip mall, a parking lot, a monument to concrete and profit. Ethan Morrow. The name was a poison in his veins. This wasn't just a business transaction. It was a personal annihilation, meticulously planned and executed by the woman he had loved. The days that followed were a blur of gray haze. Matt's lawyers, grim-faced and efficient, explained the grim reality. The contract he had signed, the one born of love and trust, was ironclad. Caryn had been within her legal rights to sell her share. The clause he had blissfully ignored now stood as the monument to his own naivete. He was trapped in a nightmare of his own making, forced into a partnership with the man who had helped destroy his life. His first call was to his son Jeremy. "Get the family together," Matt said, his voice raspy from disuse. "The big barn." Now. One by one they filtered in: Jeremy, his face etched with concern; Zach, leaning on his cane, his expression unreadable; Jacob, who looked at his father with a mixture of pity and simmering anger; and Molly, who had driven hours to be there. The absence of Amy was a palpable void, a reminder of another fracture in their foundation. "They can't do this, can they, Dad?" Jeremy asked, breaking the heavy silence. Matt took a deep breath, the weight of his children's gazes pressing down on him. "Legally," he began, the word tasting like ash. "Yes, they can. Ethan Morrow now owns 50% of Roloff Farms. He has plans, commercial plans." A collective gasp filled the barn. Jacob slammed his fist on a workbench. "I knew it. I knew there was something about her. All those business trips to Portland. She was playing you from the start, Dad." "Jacob, that's enough," Molly said softly, but the damage was done. The truth spoken aloud hung in the air, ugly and undeniable. Zach, always the most pragmatic, stepped forward. "So what are our options? We can't just let this happen." "We fight," Matt said, a flicker of his old fire returning to his eyes. "We fight him on every front. Zoning laws, historical designations, public opinion. This isn't just a farm. It's a landmark. We have the fans, we have the community. Morrow might have the legal paper, but we have the heart of this place." It was a stirring speech, but the battle would be fought on multiple fronts, and the next salvo came from an unexpected direction. 2 days later, a formal letter arrived from Amy and Chris's lawyer. Citing the farm's long history as a family asset and the recent destabilization of its ownership, they were formally petitioning for a portion of the remaining 50% that Matt still held. They argued that their share of the family legacy was being threatened by an outsider, and they needed to secure their interest. Matt read the letter, his hands trembling not with sadness, but with pure undiluted rage. While he was fighting a hostile takeover, his own ex-wife and her husband were launching their own attack from the rear. The Roloff legacy wasn't just divided, it was being cannibalized. The media, of course, feasted on the scandal. Headlines screamed, "Farm Fatale, How Caryn Chandler Stole Roloff Farms," and "Little People, Big World in Big Trouble," and "Family Feud. Ex-wife Amy demands piece of the pie." The TLC cameras, once a source of pride and income, now felt like vultures circling a carcass. Matt ordered them off the property. Meanwhile, in a sleek high-rise apartment in Vancouver, Caryn Chandler, now Caryn Morrow, looked out at the city lights. The $2.5 million was securely in her offshore accounts. The wedding to Ethan had been a quiet, private affair. No cameras, no fanfare. It was the anonymity she had craved. "It's done," Ethan said, coming to stand behind her, a glass of scotch in his hand. "The first phase is complete." Caryn didn't turn. "He looked so broken, Ethan. When I left." Ethan's voice was cool, devoid of emotion. "Sentimentality is a luxury we can't afford, my dear. You played your part perfectly. The love-struck fiancé, the trusted partner. You got us the key to the kingdom. Now we build our own empire. But the public? The lawsuit? Let them talk. Matt's lawsuit against you is a desperate man's last gasp. He has no proof of conspiracy, only a broken heart. And as for the court of public opinion," he took a sip of his scotch, It has a very short memory. In a year, no one will remember Caryn Chandler. They'll only see the new Roloff Meadows shopping plaza. But Ethan Morrow had underestimated Matt Roloff. The man who had built a paradise from a patch of weeds was not a man who surrendered easily. Matt, working with his lawyers, discovered a potential chink in Morrow's armor. The land, due to its unique agricultural status and a series of complex conservation easements Matt had put in place years earlier, might not be so easily rezoned for commercial use. It would be a long, ugly, and expensive legal battle, but it was a thread of hope. He also made a decision regarding Amy. Swallowing his pride, he invited her and Chris to the farm. The meeting was tense. Amy looked at the man she had once shared a life with, now visibly aged and weary. "Amy, Chris," Matt began, his voice steady. "I understand your concerns. But right now, an outside force is trying to erase everything we built together. Fighting me, fighting each other only helps him. I am willing to discuss a fair settlement for you. A percentage of the profits from my half, in perpetuity. But I will not subdivide the land further. We must present a united front against Morrow." Chris, ever the diplomat, nodded slowly. "A united front makes sense, Matt. But we need guarantees. In writing." It was the beginning of a fragile truce. The family, though fractured, understood that total destruction was imminent if they didn't find a way to stand together. The first major showdown occurred at a county zoning board hearing. The room was packed with reporters, fans, and local residents. On one side sat Ethan Morrow, flanked by a team of slick lawyers in tailored suits. On the other sat Matt, with Jeremy and Zach by his side, a symbol of family and tradition. Morrow's team presented glossy renderings of a state-of-the-art commercial center that would boost the local economy. They spoke of tax revenue and job creation. When it was Matt's turn, he stood slowly, his small stature belying the immense presence he commanded. He didn't have fancy charts. He had his voice. "This farm," he said, his words echoing in the silent room, "is not just dirt and crops. It's a dream. It's the sound of children laughing on a hayride. It's the smell of pumpkin pie on a fall day. It's the memory of my family, of all our families who have found joy here. What Mr. Morrow is proposing isn't progress. It's a erasure of memory. He didn't build this. He bought a piece of paper that he thinks gives him the right to tear it down. But I'm here to tell you and to tell him that some things are not for sale." The room erupted in applause. The zoning board, composed of locals who had watched the Roloff story for decades, was visibly moved. The battle was far from over. Morrow would appeal. The lawsuits would drag on. But that day Matt Roloff had won a crucial victory. He had reclaimed the narrative. He was no longer just a cuckolded man. He was a defender of a community's heart. Back at the farm, as the sun set over the fields, Matt stood alone. The ghost of Caryn's perfume was finally gone from the air. The silence was no longer empty. It was filling with. The victory at the zoning board hearing was a shot of adrenaline, a necessary balm for Matt Roloff's wounded spirit. But in the cold light of the following morning, the reality of his situation settled back in, heavier than ever. He had won a battle, not the war. Ethan Morrow was not a man who accepted defeat gracefully. He was a predator, and predators circled their wounded prey. Morrow's response was swift and brutal. Within a week, Matt was served with a new lawsuit. This one was a civil suit alleging that Matt was intentionally devaluing Morrow's asset by mobilizing public sentiment and obstructing the lawful and profitable development of the property. It demanded millions in damages and sought to have a court-appointed manager take over the operational decisions of the entire farm to ensure fair and equitable treatment of both owners. The audacity of it stole Matt's breath. Morrow was using the law not just as a shield, but as a cudgel, trying to batter Matt into submission and strip him of the last vestiges of control over his own life's work. "He's trying to bankrupt you, Matt," his lawyer Susan Way stated flatly. She was a sharp, no-nonsense litigator from Portland who had taken his case after seeing the news. "He knows a prolonged legal fight will drain your resources. He can outspend you indefinitely. This new suit is a pressure tactic." Matt ran a hand over his face, the fatigue a permanent weight in his bones. "So what are my options?" "We fight it. We argue that your actions are protected speech and that you are acting in the best interest of the long-term value of the property, which is intrinsically tied to its agricultural and historical character. But it's risky and expensive. The financial strain was already becoming apparent. Legal fees were mounting at an alarming rate. The farm's revenue, heavily dependent on the seasonal pumpkin patch and tourism, was suffering due to the negative publicity and the fact that Matt's attention was entirely consumed by the legal battle. He had to take out a second mortgage on his portion of the land, a bitter pill to swallow. The fracture with Amy and Chris, though temporarily patched, remained fragile. Their agreement for a percentage of his profits was meaningless if there were no profits to be had. Tension simmered just below the surface of their uneasy alliance. It was Jacob who presented the most volatile reaction. He had taken his father's betrayal and the farm's peril harder than anyone. He began spending his days digging through old financial records and boxes of Caryn's belongings that had been left behind in the attic of the main house, a ghost hunter searching for evidence. "Dad, we need to hit back," Jacob insisted one evening, his eyes blazing with intensity. He had spread out bank statements and credit card bills on the kitchen table. "We can't just play defense. Look at this." In the months before she left, Caryn was making large, unexplained cash withdrawals. And there are charges here for a hotel in Vancouver months before she supposedly met this Morrow guy. Matt looked at the papers, his heart aching. "Jake, what does it matter? We know she betrayed me." Knowing the precise timeline of the affair doesn't change the legal situation. It proves it was premeditated. Jacob argued, his voice rising.